Hi everybody, this is a look at the Nikon 8mm autofocus lens, which was produced from 1983 to 1986, and it was for use with the Nikon F3AF camera. And along with this lens they also produced a 200mm lens as well, specifically for that camera. And I'm going to show you some details about this lens, just go over all the features of it and show you how it works with different cameras. I've got the dealer's record card here for this lens. Unfortunately it's not got any date details or anything, but it does show it was purchased in Saudi Arabia. I've also got the instruction manual. To start with, I just go over the specification details, which I'm going to read from this manual, just to give you some figures for it. So it's a focal length of 8mm. It's got a maximum aperture of 2.8 and a minimum aperture of f32. The lens construction is 6 elements in 4 groups. It's got a picture angle of 30 degrees. And it's got a distance scale, which is in meters and feet, and that goes from infinity down to 1 meter. The aperture scale also has a ADR readout scale as well. The diaphragm is fully automatic, and you've got a choice between autofocus and manual focus, obviously depending on the camera you use it with. It has a filter size of 52mm, and the dimensions are it's 69mm in diameter and 78mm long, and it weighs approximately 390 grams. Just take the caps off so you can have a look. So if you look at the mount of this lens, and I'll compare it to this. This is a 50mm 1.8 AF lens, which will work on modern digital cameras, whereas this one won't in autofocus mode. So the differences in the mount, just line them up similar. You can see that this lens has a shaft for the focusing with cameras with the integral motor, whereas this one doesn't. It relies on the contacts to drive the autofocus. Now it is different, as you can see, from the 50mm one. It's got a different number of pins, and the actual layout is staggered as well, which is strange. So it just makes it a unique mount. And for that reason, it will only autofocus on the F3AF camera, the F4, and I also believe from reading on the internet it will autofocus on the F501. Now I'm not sure about any cameras in between those. I mean, there's also obviously an F801 which was produced at the same time as the F4, but I can't verify whether it would autofocus with that camera or not. So looking at the lens, if it's set to manual focus, you can turn this ring and you can see the distance scale alter, and it actually focuses on the rear element, goes in and out. The front element doesn't move at all, either turn or in or outwards. And when you flick it to autofocus, obviously this ring then doesn't do anything, and it relies on the information from the finder. It's powered from the finder as well, and the motors are built into the lens itself. So it's a similar layout to a AFI or AFS lens, but not the same. Now when it's focusing automatically as well, this ring doesn't turn when it autofocuses. So it's got an aperture ring. It has a prong as well, and it functions in non-autofocus mode as a Nikon AIS lens, and it will work like that on all cameras that don't support that feature. Now obviously it's different with digital cameras that rely on the information from the CPU in the lens, which obviously this doesn't have a CPU in the lens. With digital cameras you can make it work as an AIS lens if you've got manual lens data input on the digital camera. It's a very nice lens, got a nice feel. It is known to be very sharp as well. It's not a great wide open aperture, f2.8, but it's very suitable, 80mm. It's a nice short telephoto or portrait lens. So I'll show you that on, I've got a Nikon F3 here. I don't have a 3AF, but I have an F3, and obviously the finish to the lens matches the F3 perfectly. Now on the F3 it will function as a normal AI lens where you will get aperture priority or manual exposure modes. You need to set the lens on manual focusing, of course, and then you simply, using the meter, set the aperture shutter speed accordingly and take a picture. Fairly straightforward, and that's the way it will function on most manual film cameras. On a Nikon F or F2 it will work on those because it does have the prong, so it can link with the photomic heads in those cameras and work like any other lens that has a prong or as a AIS lens. I'll show it working on a digital camera. This is a D300S, which is obviously autofocus, and it's DX format, but you won't get autofocus with this lens with this camera. It just won't operate, it doesn't recognise it at all. But what you can do is, if you go to the menu, you have an option for non-CPU lens data, and I've already set it up on this camera. So if I go inside there, as you can see, lens number 2 I've set as an 80mm lens with a maximum aperture of f2.8. So when it's set on that option, I can then mount the lens, switch the camera on, and it won't work in program mode or shutter priority mode. You need to set aperture priority or manual, and then it will know the f-stop because you've set the minimum one, which it will show you in the window, and obviously you can it will set a shutter speed for you in aperture priority mode. So you can take, it won't focus automatically obviously, and you set it on manual so you can focus, but you will get a focus confirmation dot appear in your viewfinder when it's focused correctly, and you can operate that and take pictures. Obviously I didn't focus it obviously with that camera. So that's how it can operate with the digital camera. Now obviously you can't do that with all digital cameras. It depends if you've got that option to enter non-CPU lens data. I'll show you with autofocusing with a camera. The only one I've got which to work with is the F4. Now, I'm not sure why it should autofocus with this camera and not later autofocus cameras. Obviously, it's probably because it's in the same type of era. This came out in 1988. And so I do also believe it autofocuses with the F501. I can't confirm that, but I believe that is the case. And again, that would make sense because the 501 was Nikon's first autofocus camera with the integral motor. So it would make sense to make it work with this lens. So with this camera, the Nikon F4, you can mount the lens, switch on the camera. Again, it will only work in aperture priority or manual mode. You can't use it in program mode where it sets the aperture and shutter automatically by setting it to the minimum aperture. That feature doesn't work. But you can make use of the autofocus option on this camera. And if you leave the F4 set on continuous autofocus and press the shutter halfway down, you'll see or here, you can't see it, it's trying to focus. Obviously I'm not pointing at something it can focus on. The minimum distance is 1 metre. That gives you an idea, it will focus with this camera. And you also have, if you leave it set on continuous, you've got 2 buttons here, and you'd use them either that way if you hold it horizontally, or if you do vertical shooting you could press the button that way, and what that does is it locks the focus. So you could leave the camera in continuous focusing mode, focus on the subject, pressing the button, reframe and take your shot, and it will hold that focus for you. Obviously that feature is built into the F4 anyway, but it is also built into that lens. You can obviously use it in manual focus as well on this camera, but it's the only camera I've got where it will autofocus on. So there you go, I think that covers about everything. Very sharp lens. I've not seen the 200mm one. The serial numbers on the 80mm and 200mm run parallel with each other. In other words, they're intermixed with the serial numbers, and they produced about 11,500 of these lenses together. I'm not sure of how many they've made of each, but I'm guessing by how the serial numbers ended, it's roughly probably around 8,000 or 7,000 of the 8mm one and 7,000 to 4,000 of the 200mm one, but I'm only guessing obviously for that. So there you go, that's a look at the 80mm autofocus lens, which was designed for the F3AF, but does work on the F4 in autofocus and will work on other cameras as an AIS lens. Thanks for watching.